They said that wild horse could not be touched. He threw off every tamer in the county, broke ropes, snapped gates, and walked out of pens like they were made of paper. Men with big hats and bigger mouths swore they would fix him in one afternoon. He put every one of them in the dirt. Until the day a poor girl climbed into the arena, and the horse did something no one expected. Dust still hung in the late afternoon light when the last tamer hit the ground. The crowd gasped first, then laughed, then went quiet as the man limped away, holding his side and his pride. "That beast is cursed," one old rancher said. "Sell him for meat," another muttered. By the far fence, a young cowboy named Luke watched in silence. He had seen bad horses before, but this one moved different. The anger in the animal's eyes looked too close to pain. Behind the arena, in a smaller pen, a black calf pressed his nose through the boards. He had been born small and late, with legs too long for his own body. The ranch hands laughed and called him leftover. Only Luke called him by his real name. "Easy, Bronco," Luke whispered, scratching the calf between the horns. "You're not going to the auction. Not if I can help it." A sharp voice cut through the noise. "Move aside. That girl's lost her mind." Luke turned. A thin girl in a faded dress and worn boots stood at the gate of the arena. Her braids were messy, her hands empty. No rope. No whip. No saddle. "Someone stop her," a woman cried. "She'll get herself killed." But the girl had already slipped under the rail. The wild horse froze. His chest rose and fell, steam curling from his nostrils. Everyone held their breath. From the back pen, Bronco watched, eyes dark and wide. Luke whispered, more to himself than anyone, "What are you doing, kid?" The girl took one slow step toward the horse. "Easy," she said softly. "I know what it feels like when nobody listens to you." The horse's ears flicked forward. And in that strange, quiet moment, Luke noticed something he could not explain. The wild horse was not the only one listening. The little black calf behind him stood very still, as if those words were meant for him too. The horse lowered his head an inch, and the arena fell so quiet that even the cattle far in the pasture seemed to pause. The girl kept walking slowly, one careful step at a time, like she understood the ground itself could break the moment if she moved too fast. Luke felt something tighten in his chest. He had seen men try to tame wild horses with ropes, shouts, and pride. He had never seen anyone try it with gentleness. A ranch hand whispered, "If she gets stepped on, it's on all of us." "No," Luke murmured. "She knows something we don't." Bronco pressed harder against the fence, letting out a soft, confused sound. Luke glanced back at him. "Easy, boy. Just watch." The girl spoke again, her voice steady but soft. "They all think you're angry," she told the horse. "But I can see you're just tired. Tired of being pushed. Tired of being blamed." The horse's breathing slowed, barely noticeable, but enough for Luke to feel a shiver run up his spine. She raised her hand, not high, just enough for the horse to notice. "If you want me to stop, say so. I won't fight you." "Kid, don't touch him," the old rancher barked. Luke shot him a look. "Let her try." The horse shifted his weight, hooves scraping against the sand. For a moment, it seemed like everything would fall apart. But instead of striking, he let out a long breath that almost sounded like surrender. "You see," she whispered, "I'm not here to hurt you." The horse stepped forward. One slow step. Then another. Someone near the rail gasped. "She's crazy, or blessed," a woman muttered. Bronco let out a soft call again, his small body tense with curiosity. Luke placed a hand on his neck. "I hear you, little guy. Something's happening." Then came the moment no one expected. The horse lowered his head completely, stopping right in front of the girl. She reached out, trembling, and touched his cheek gently. Luke couldn't look away. It wasn't just the horse she had calmed. The calf beside him seemed to soften too, as if the girl's voice had reached some quiet place inside him. "What's your name?" Luke asked her when she turned slightly. She didn't look at him, still resting her hand on the horse. "Maria." Luke felt a strange feeling in his chest, part awe, part fear, part hope. Because he knew something had just begun. Something that would change the girl. The wild horse. And that tiny black calf named Bronco. Forever. Maria kept her hand on the horse's cheek as if she was holding the whole world steady. The horse didn't pull away. He didn't snap or rear or toss his head like the men had warned. He only breathed, long and slow, as if her touch settled a storm inside him. Luke had never seen anything like it. None of the cowboys had. It made every excuse they'd ever given, about anger, about danger, about bad blood, sound childish. A ranch hand finally found his voice. That horse ain't mean. He's scared." Maria nodded without turning. He wasn't hurting anyone. He was only trying to protect himself. Luke watched her closely. The way she spoke wasn't loud or proud. It was quiet, honest, almost like she was talking to someone who had been alone too long. The horse's ears flicked as if he understood every word. Then Bronco, the calf, let out a sudden call, louder this time. It made Maria look toward him. "Who's he?" she asked softly. Luke stepped forward. "Bronco. He's small. Too small. The ranch wants to send him to the auction next week." Maria's eyes softened in a way Luke couldn't describe. "He doesn't look small to me. He looks like someone who needs a chance." At her voice, Bronco pushed his nose through the fence again, almost desperate. Luke frowned. "He's usually shy. Keeps to himself." "Animals feel things before we do," Maria said. "And he understands what's happening." Before Luke could answer, a loud voice broke the calm. "That's enough. Get that girl out of there." It was the ranch boss. Heavy boots, heavy voice, heavy pride. He shoved through the crowd, face red. "I told you all, no one goes in there. That horse is property. Not a toy for children." Maria kept her hand on the horse. "I'm not playing." The horse suddenly stepped between her and the boss. Just one step, but enough to make the man freeze. "You see that?" someone whispered. "He's protecting her." The boss's jaw tightened. "This is foolishness. She got lucky. That's all." "No," Luke said, surprising himself with how steady his voice sounded. "Luck doesn't make a horse choose who to trust." Maria slowly stroked the horse's neck, grounding him again. "I just listened. That's all he needed." The boss pointed at Luke. "You. Take the calf to the back pens. And keep this girl away from my stock." Bronco cried out again, sharper, almost protesting. Maria turned to Luke. "Please don't take him away. Not from here. Not today." Luke hesitated. Something in her eyes made him feel like he was standing at a crossroads he didn't understand yet. "He'll be all right," he said, but his voice didn't feel convincing, even to himself. Maria looked back at Bronco, then at the wild horse beside her. "No. He won't." And for the first time, Luke wondered if the little black calf had a story inside him. Just like the wild horse. Just like the girl. A story no one had cared to hear. Bronco wouldn't stop calling. His small voice cut through the noise of the ranch like he was trying to hold on to something he couldn't name. Maria turned toward him again, and for a moment, Luke felt caught in the space between them, girl, calf, and wild horse, all connected by something none of the older men could see. The boss growled, "Luke, did you hear me? Move that calf." Luke hesitated. His hand rested on the rail. Bronco pushed his nose through again, eyes wide and unsure, like he remembered every cold morning he'd been ignored and every night he'd slept alone in the far pen. Maria stepped closer to the fence. "Don't take him yet," she said softly. "He's afraid." The boss snorted. "That calf's afraid of his own shadow." Maria shook her head. "He's afraid of being left behind." Luke swallowed. Those words hit deeper than he expected. Before anyone could move, the wild horse beside Maria let out a low, rumbling breath. Not angry. Not restless. It sounded almost like agreement. The crowd shifted uneasily. The boss's face reddened further. "That horse ain't agreeing with anything. Animals don't understand this nonsense." Luke spoke before he thought. "Maybe they understand more than we do." The boss glared. "I won't debate feelings with a cowboy who still sleeps in the bunkhouse." Maria gently laid her hand on the horse's neck again. "You can send me out if you want," she told the boss, "but you should know something. He came to me because he recognized fear in me. The same fear he carries." She nodded toward Bronco. "And that calf recognizes something too." Bronco cried again, 3 short, desperate sounds. Maria's voice softened. "He thinks you're taking him somewhere bad." Luke felt his chest tighten. "He's going to the back pens. That's all." Maria whispered, "That's where they hide the animals before the auction." Luke froze. The words hung heavy between them. Bronco pressed harder against the boards as if he understood exactly what she said. "That's enough," the boss snapped. "Get that calf out of sight before the buyers arrive next week." Maria's eyes flashed with something sharp, fear and determination mixed. "He deserves one chance," she said. "That's all." Luke looked from the girl, to the calf, to the wild horse who hadn't moved an inch away from her. "Boss," Luke said quietly, "maybe we should?" But he didn't finish because something unexpected happened. The wild horse stepped toward the fence, placing himself almost between Maria and Bronco. His ears pointed forward. His chest rose and fell slowly, and with a small, almost fragile sound, Bronco tried to mimic the horse's breath, long and shaky. The arena went silent. Someone whispered, "What in the world?" Luke felt it again, that strange pull in the air. It wasn't just Maria calming the horse. It wasn't just Bronco crying out. It was all three of them, pulling toward the same place. As if this moment wasn't an accident at all. As if something was beginning. The wild horse stood between Maria and Bronco like a wall made of muscle and breath, but his eyes were gentle, focused, aware, choosing. Maria placed her hand lightly on his shoulder, and the horse didn't flinch. Instead, he let out a soft sound that made even the roughest ranch hands shift uneasily. Luke felt the air change. "Boss, look at them," he murmured. The boss folded his arms. "I see a girl messing with animals that ain't hers." Maria didn't look away from Bronco. "He's scared because he knows what's coming." Luke rubbed the back of his neck. "Maybe we can wait. One day. Just one." "We don't run a rescue center," the boss snapped. "We run a ranch. The world isn't gentle, Luke. You should know that by now." Maria stepped closer to the fence. Bronco pushed forward, trying to get even closer to her. His tiny hooves scraped the ground and he let out another trembling call. The wild horse beside her dropped his head again, calmer than any of them had ever seen him. "It's the same fear," Maria whispered. "The same kind I had when I left home. The fear of not being worth keeping." Luke's breath caught. He didn't know her story, but those words felt too real to ignore. The boss groaned. "Feelings don't pay bills." Maria finally turned toward him. "No. But they make us human." Luke bit the inside of his cheek. He had stood on that ranch since he was 14, did every job there was, stayed quiet, followed every order. But now he felt something shift inside him, something he didn't expect. A line he wasn't sure he should cross, but couldn't ignore. "Boss," Luke said slowly, "Bronco's only small because he was born late. He'll grow. He just needs time. And feed," the boss barked. "And care. And money. You want to take him on? Fine. Pay for him yourself." Maria looked at Luke, eyes hopeful but scared. "Can you?" Luke hesitated because the truth hit him hard. He barely had enough to buy new boots, let alone save a calf. The boss smirked, seeing Luke's silence as a win. Bronco cried again, a soft, lonely sound that echoed across the pen. Maria whispered, "Please don't let him be alone." Luke closed his eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of every choice he ever made. He opened them again and took a slow breath. But before he could speak, something unexpected happened. The wild horse suddenly nudged Maria forward, firm but gentle, pushing her closer to the calf as if encouraging her, or urging Luke to decide. The crowd gasped. Maria steadied herself, touching the fence. Luke stared at the horse, then at Maria, then at Bronco. And in that moment he realized something. This wasn't just about a calf, or a wild horse, or a girl who didn't belong here. It was about whether he was brave enough to change something. For the first time in his life, he stepped toward Maria, opened his mouth, and everything waited on what he would say next. Luke looked at Maria, then at Bronco, then at the wild horse standing steady beside her. It felt like the whole ranch was holding its breath. For the first time in years, Luke wasn't just following orders or doing what kept the peace. Something inside him whispered that this moment mattered, more than his pay, more than the boss's pride, more than the ranch rules. He placed both hands on the fence and said quietly, "I'll take him." The boss blinked. "What?" Luke swallowed. "Bronco. I'll take him. I'll buy him. Whatever it costs." The ranch hands murmured, surprised. Even the ones who usually teased Luke stared with their mouths half open. The boss stepped forward. "You're talking nonsense. You barely scrape by." "I'll find a way," Luke said. His voice trembled, but he didn't back down. Maria's eyes widened, not in pity but in hope. Genuine hope. Bronco let out a soft, shaky moo, pressing his nose harder against the boards like he was reaching for Luke and Maria both. "You think a runt calf is worth saving?" the boss said, almost laughing. Luke nodded. "Yes, I think he is." The boss scoffed. "Fine. You want him? You can pay at the end of the month. But he leaves this ranch. He's not staying here." Maria stepped closer to Luke. "Where will you take him?" Luke hesitated. He hadn't thought that far. "There's an old shed behind the creek near the south pasture. I can fix it up." "That shed?" a ranch hand muttered. "It's falling apart." Luke nodded. "Then I'll fix it." The boss rolled his eyes. "You do whatever you want. But he's your responsibility now." Maria looked at Bronco with relief. The wild horse shifted, letting out a gentle breath as if approving the decision. But then something unexpected happened. Bronco took a step back, not scared but confused. His small body trembled. Luke frowned. "What's wrong, boy?" Maria leaned in, her voice soft. "He thinks you're taking him away alone." Luke froze. "He has me." "He doesn't know you yet," Maria whispered. "But he knows the wild horse. He knows me. He's afraid of losing the few things he understands." Luke felt the truth hit him hard. The calf wasn't just afraid of leaving, he was afraid of leaving alone. Maria looked at the wild horse. "He won't go if he thinks he's being abandoned again." The horse lifted his head, eyes focused on Bronco. A warm, heavy moment passed between them, silent but deep. Luke exhaled. "Then I won't take him alone." Maria looked up. "What do you mean?" "I mean," Luke stepped closer. "If Bronco comes with me, then you and the horse come too." The boss threw his hands in the air. "Now this is ridiculous." But Luke didn't look away from Maria. "You've already done what no tamer could. And if I'm taking a calf with fear in his bones, I need the one person he trusts." Maria stared at him like she wasn't sure if she heard right. "You want me to help?" "Yes," Luke said. "Bronco needs all of us." The wild horse suddenly let out a loud, deep sound, strong, clear, almost like a promise. Bronco answered with a soft, hopeful cry. Maria's eyes filled with something warm. "Then we'll help him," she said. "All three of us." Luke nodded, feeling something settle inside him, something he hadn't felt in years. Oh. But none of them knew the ranch boss wasn't done. None of them noticed him talking quietly to a buyer near the gate. And none of them heard the words that would threaten everything they were trying to save. They only heard Bronco calling softly, as if sensing a storm was already on its way. The buyer's truck sat by the far gate, engine humming. No one in the arena paid attention to it. Not Luke, not Maria, not the other cowboys who were still whispering about the scene they'd just witnessed. Only the boss kept glancing toward it, his jaw tight, sweat gathering at his temples. Luke didn't notice. He was too focused on Bronco, who had stopped crying and was now pressed so close to the fence that his tiny horns nearly scraped the wood. Maria knelt in front of him, her fingers brushing his nose gently. "It's all right," she whispered. "You're not alone anymore." Bronco leaned into her touch like a child leaning into warmth for the first time. The wild horse behind her lowered his head too, standing close enough that his breath stirred the dust around her boots. Luke felt something settle in his chest, a strange sense of peace he hadn't known he needed. But it didn't last. The boss clapped his hands loudly. "All right, show's over. Everyone get back to work." The crowd scattered, though many of them kept glancing back at Maria and the two animals with wide, confused eyes. Luke stayed where he was, leaning against the fence, watching the boss talk to the buyer in low whispers. Maria noticed too. "He's angry," she murmured. "He always is," Luke said, but something in his tone betrayed worry. Bronco stepped back from the fence, sensing the tension. He lifted his head, sniffing the air, ears turning toward the gate. The wild horse tensed slightly as if picking up on the same quiet warning. Maria stood. "He's planning something." Luke looked at her. "You think so?" "I know so," she whispered. "He doesn't like losing control." At that same moment, the buyer pointed toward Bronco's pen. Luke's stomach dropped. "No," he muttered. "No, he wouldn't." Maria took a step closer to him. "What did you do when you bought Bronco? Did you sign anything?" "No," Luke said. "He just agreed to let me take him at the end of the month." Maria's face fell. "That means he can still sell him." Bronco let out a sharp cry, almost like he understood every word. The wild horse pawed at the ground, his muscles tightening with unease. Luke pushed away from the fence. "I need to talk to him." But before he could move, the boss and the buyer started walking toward Bronco's pen. The buyer held a thick rope in his hand. Maria grabbed Luke's sleeve. "Don't let them touch him." Luke's heart hammered. "I won't." He took 2 steps forward, then stopped when the buyer spoke loud enough for everyone to hear. "I'll take the little one today. Saves me making another trip." Bronco backed up, trembling. Maria stepped in front of Luke, her voice shaking but strong. "You can't. He's not yours anymore." The boss smirked. "He's not Luke's either. Not until he pays. And he can't." Luke clenched his fists. "Don't do this. Please." The boss ignored him and nodded to the buyer. "Go ahead." The buyer slipped through the fence. Bronco let out a terrified cry. The wild horse reared his head sharply, snorting, pawing the dirt. Maria whispered almost in prayer, "Please, don't take him." Luke felt something inside him break loose, something old, something heavy, something he had swallowed down for years. He stepped between Bronco and the buyer. "No," Luke said, voice low but shaking the air, "he's not leaving." Maria gasped softly behind him. The buyer frowned. "Move, boy." Luke shook his head. "Not this one. Not today." The wild horse stood behind Maria, still, tense, watching everything like he understood what line was being drawn. And Bronco, trembling, pressed his tiny head against Luke's leg, as if choosing him all over again. The buyer froze with the rope dangling from his hand. Luke didn't move. Bronco pressed tighter against his leg, shaking so hard Luke could feel it through his jeans. The wild horse behind Maria held his ground, snorting low, ears pinned forward in sharp warning. Even with the arena wide and open, the space suddenly felt too small, too tense, like the whole ranch was waiting to see who would blink first. The boss stepped forward, face dark as a thundercloud. "Luke," he growled, "don't make a scene." Luke didn't step aside. "I'm not making a scene. I'm keeping a promise." The buyer huffed. "This is foolishness. I paid good money to drive out here." "You didn't pay for him," Luke said. "He's not yours." "He's not yours either," the boss snapped. Maria stepped closer, her voice steady but quiet. "He's someone's. And he knows who." Bronco gave another small cry, softer this time, less fear, more pleading. Luke reached down and placed a hand on his back. "Easy, boy. I'm here." The buyer took another step. "Move, Cowboy. I don't want to get rough." The wild horse suddenly let out a loud blast of breath, stomping the ground so hard dust shot up like smoke. The buyer jumped back, startled. The boss shouted, "Keep that animal back." But the horse wasn't charging. He was standing tall, protective, alert, every muscle saying no. Maria put a calming hand on his shoulder, then looked at the buyer. "Please leave him alone." The buyer scoffed. "I don't take orders from kids." "You should," Maria said, "when they're the only ones doing what's right." Luke forced himself to breathe. He faced his boss, the man who had controlled his pay, his work, his future since he was a teenager. "I'll pay you," he said. "Every cent. I'll work double shifts. Cut fence lines for free. Fix everything that's broken on this ranch. Just, don't take him." The boss stared at him, eyes narrowing. "You really want to throw away your life for a runt calf?" Luke's jaw tightened. "I'm trying not to throw away his." Maria looked up at Luke with something like pride but also fear, because they both knew the boss wasn't a man who liked being challenged. The boss finally turned to the buyer. "Give me a minute." They stepped aside, whispering harshly. Maria grabbed Luke's arm. "He's not giving up. He'll find a way." "I know." Luke swallowed. "But so will we." Bronco nuzzled Maria's hand, calmer now but still trembling. The wild horse lowered his head toward the calf, touching him gently as if saying, "You're not alone." Luke watched the three of them, girl, calf, horse, standing together like a small circle of quiet courage. Something shifted deep inside him, something he couldn't ignore anymore. When the boss turned back, his face was unreadable. He said only two words. "Final offer." Luke braced himself. Maria held her breath. Bronco froze. The boss pointed at the wild horse. "You want the calf?" he said. "Fine. Take him." Luke exhaled in relief. But the boss wasn't finished. "But the girl and the horse leave this ranch today." Maria's eyes widened. Luke's heart dropped. Bronco cried out in panic. And Luke realized something awful. Saving one would cost losing the others. And he had to choose, right now, before the buyer stepped in again. Luke felt the ground tilt under his boots. The boss's words hit harder than any blow he had ever taken. Maria stared at him, stunned. The wild horse stepped back a pace, not in fear, but like he sensed a trap closing around them. Bronco pressed himself against Luke's leg again, trembling as if he knew something terrible had just shifted. Maria whispered, He wants us gone?" Luke nodded slowly. "He's trying to break us apart." The boss crossed his arms. "You want the calf? Fine. Take him. But the girl and the horse, both of them, walk off my property today. I won't have that cursed animal and his little magician messing up my ranch." Some ranch hands muttered, but none of them spoke up. They knew the boss. They knew how he dug his heels and once he tasted power. Maria blinked, unsure. "Where would we go?" "That's not my problem," the boss snapped. Bronco let out a shaky cry, turning in circles like he couldn't understand why everything was falling apart. The wild horse pawed the dirt, ears tight back, chest rising and falling too fast. Luke stepped between Maria and the boss. This is wrong. She hasn't hurt anyone. And that horse, he's calmer with her than with anyone else. That's the problem, the boss barked. He listens to her, not us. Makes us look like fools. I won't keep animals on my land that only obey strangers. Luke clenched his fists. She's not a stranger. Maria looked at Luke. Her voice was small. I don't want you to choose between us. The boss smirked. He already has to. One or the other. That's the deal. Luke felt heat crawl up his neck. This ain't a deal. It's punishment. The boss shrugged. Call it whatever you want, boy. I'm giving you a choice. Maria lowered her eyes. Luke, he's doing this because he knows you care. The buyer grew impatient. Hurry it up. Either the kid moves or I'm taking that calf. Bronco cried out again, panicked and confused. He shoved his tiny head into Luke's leg, then turned toward Maria, torn between the two people who had just become his whole world. Luke's heart twisted painfully. He knew Bronco wouldn't go anywhere if Maria wasn't there. But if Maria left, then the wild horse would follow and the calf would lose the only two souls he trusted. Please, Maria whispered, voice cracking. Don't let him be taken. Luke wiped a hand over his face. He had no money, no land, no home besides a bunkhouse and a shed falling apart. He couldn't protect them all. But maybe he didn't have to choose. An idea hit him so suddenly that he almost gasped. Boss, Luke said, stepping forward, what if they stay with me? On my side of the creek. You said they had to leave your ranch. Fine. Let them come to mine. The boss scoffed. You don't own anything. I own what's beyond the creek, Luke said firmly. My father left me that strip before he passed. It's small but it's legal land. And it's not yours. The boss froze. A few ranch hands exchanged glances. They knew the land. A thin stretch of dry pasture, barely useful, but it wasn't ranch property. Maria's eyes widened. Luke, you would take us too? Luke nodded once. All three of you. If you'll come. Bronco made a hopeful sound as if he understood. The wild horse lifted his head sharply, watching Luke with something like recognition. Maria put a hand over her mouth, tears forming in her eyes. I don't know what to say. The boss growled, this is nonsense. That land's useless. Then you won't miss us, Luke said. The buyer threw his rope down. I didn't drive all the way out here for a bedtime story. Luke finally stood tall, taller than he'd ever felt. Then leave. Silence hit the ranch. The buyer muttered something under his breath, stomped to his truck, slammed the door and drove off in a cloud of dust. Bronco watched the dust drift away. Maria looked at Luke like she was seeing him for the first time. And the wild horse stepped beside her, lowering his head between them, as if sealing a promise no one had spoken out loud. But the boss wasn't done. He jabbed a finger toward Luke. Fine. You want them out? You take them out. Today. Before sundown. Luke nodded. We will. He didn't realize until that moment that Bronco had stopped trembling, because for the first time, he believed he had a home. But none of them knew what waited beyond the creek. A past tied to the horse, a truth tied to Maria, and a test that would decide if this new little family could survive, or fall apart before it even began. Luke didn't waste a second. As soon as the boss turned away, he motioned for Maria to follow him toward the south gate. Bronco hurried behind them on shaky legs, still glancing back every few steps as if afraid someone would drag him away. The wild horse stayed close too, close enough that Luke could hear the steady rhythm of his breath, deep and protective, like he had decided he belonged to this small group now. They walked past the hay barn, past the worn fencing, past the corrals where cowboys pretended to work but couldn't stop staring. Everyone whispered, but no one stepped in. Something about the four of them, Luke, Maria, Bronco, and the wild horse, felt too unusual to interrupt. Like a story unfolding in front of their eyes. Luke pointed ahead. We'll cross that ridge and head down to the creek. My land starts on the other side. Maria nodded, but he saw the worry on her face. What about the shed you mentioned? It's old, Luke admitted. But it'll keep you and the animals dry until I fix it. Maria brushed Bronco's back with her hand. Then that's where we'll go. Bronco gave a faint moo, tired but calmer. The wild horse nudged him gently, like guiding him forward. But when they reached the ridge, Luke stopped. The wind shifted. The wild horse lifted his head sharply. Bronco pressed into Maria again, nervous. Luke followed the horse's gaze toward the woods beyond the creek. A shadow moved. Then another. Luke narrowed his eyes. There's someone over there. Maria's breath caught. Do you think the boss sent someone after us? No, Luke said slowly. If he wanted to stop us, he would have done it already. The wild horse pawed the ground, tense but not afraid, alert, watching. Bronco let out a tiny nervous cry. Luke stepped forward. Stay behind me. Maria obeyed, pulling Bronco close. The wild horse moved to her other side, forming a barrier without being told. Luke called out, "Who's there?" No answer. The wind rustled through the tall grass, carrying the faint scent of dust, and something else. Then a figure stepped out of the trees. An older man. Hat low. Shoulders bent. Clothes worn from years of sun. Luke stiffened. "Sir? Can we help you?" The man didn't speak at first. His eyes weren't on Luke. They were locked on the wild horse. Maria whispered, "He knows him?" The horse's ears flicked, chest rising and falling in a trembling rhythm. Not fear. Recognition. Luke moved a half step forward, ready for anything. "Who are you?" The old man let out a breath that sounded more like a memory than a word. "I've been looking for that horse for a long time." Maria stiffened. "Why?" The man raised his head, eyes full of something heavy. "Because he wasn't born wild. Someone took him from me." Luke's heart thudded. Maria whispered, "You mean, he belonged to you?" The old man nodded slowly. "He's my son's horse. Or, he was." He swallowed hard. "My boy died 3 winters ago. And that horse ran off before I could say goodbye." Maria touched the horse's neck gently. "He wasn't running away," she murmured. "He was grieving." The horse lowered his head, almost touching the old man's boot. Luke felt a knot in his chest. Bronco nudged closer to Maria, quietly watching. The old man looked up at Luke and Maria. "You saved him," he said softly. "Both of you." Maria blinked, confused. "We didn't do anything special." "Yes, you did," the man whispered. "You listened." The wild horse leaned gently into Maria's hand, as if confirming it. Then the man looked at Bronco and smiled faintly. "And that little calf, he's attached to the both of you. Animals know where they're wanted." Maria lowered her head. "We want him. All of them." Luke nodded. "They're family now." The old man studied Luke for a long moment, then surprised them both by saying, "Then let me help you." Maria's eyes widened. "Help us?" The man nodded. "I can fix that shed. I can bring hay. I can show you how to handle that horse without breaking his spirit." Luke couldn't speak for a moment. "But why?" The man looked at the horse with a broken smile. "Because you saved the last piece of my boy." The wind blew softly through the grass. Bronco nudged the man's boot gently, like offering comfort. Maria wiped her eyes. Luke exhaled, feeling something new settle inside him. Peace, maybe. Or purpose. But the man lifted his hand. "One thing you should know," he said quietly. "Your shed, it's not as empty as you think." Luke frowned. "What do you mean?" The old man nodded toward the trees. "There's something inside it waiting for you." Maria's breath hitched. Luke felt the hair on the back of his neck stand up. And Bronco suddenly pressed himself against his leg, shivering, as if he already knew what was waiting in that forgotten shed beyond the creek. Luke felt a cold ripple run down his spine. The creek's slow water moved behind them, quiet and steady, but the air around the ridge suddenly felt heavier, like something unseen had been holding its breath for a long time. Maria tightened her hand on Bronco's back. The wild horse stepped closer to her, muscles tense, ears forward, eyes fixed on the old man. "What do you mean something is inside the shed?" Luke asked carefully. The old man looked toward the trees again. "That place was never fully abandoned. Someone left something there, or someone." Maria swallowed. "Someone?" Luke felt the ground shift under him. "Sir, you need to explain." The old man didn't answer right away. He looked at the wild horse with a mix of sorrow and pride, then knelt slowly so he was eye level with Bronco. The calf stepped toward him, trembling less than before. "The shed was where my boy used to train horses," the man said. "He'd spend hours there, talking, watching, learning their moods. After he passed, I couldn't bear to go inside. But 2 winters ago, someone else started using it. Not a person, at least not in the way you'd think." Maria's breath quivered. "Who?" The man pointed gently at the wild horse. "Him." Luke blinked. "The shed was his shelter?" "No," the man murmured. "It was his refuge. A place he kept returning to, like he expected someone to be waiting." His voice tightened. "Maybe he thought my boy was still in there." Maria covered her mouth, overwhelmed. The wild horse lowered his head, eyes soft and old with grief. Bronco moved closer to him, nuzzling gently like he sensed the ache behind the story. Luke exhaled, shaken. Then what's in it now? The man straightened, face serious. Tracks, fresh ones. Someone else found the place. Someone who hasn't left. He paused. And I don't think they want company. Maria stepped back instinctively. Is it dangerous? Not in the way you're thinking, the man said. But you'll need to see it yourself. Luke felt a cold worry rising, but he forced himself to stay steady. We're going down there now. The old man nodded. I'll walk with you. Maria clutched Bronco gently. What about him? We can't leave him here. Luke shook his head. We take all of them. No matter what. The wild horse made a deep sound, stepping in front of Maria as if promising to keep her safe. Bronco followed close behind, his tiny legs shaking but determined not to be left behind. The group crossed the ridge. Grass brushed their boots. Dust lifted in soft spirals. The creek's slow gurgle filled the heavy silence. When they reached Luke's land, the shed stood crooked in the distance. Leaning to one side, its roof half collapsed, the wood sun-bleached and tired. A place that looked forgotten by the world. But the wild horse stopped abruptly, ears stiff, nostrils flaring. Bronco pressed into Maria's leg, whining. The old man raised a hand. Stay close. Luke stepped forward first. What's in there? A person? An animal? The old man shook his head slowly. No, he whispered. It's something the horse left behind. Something he couldn't carry with him. Luke's heart thudded. What do you mean? The old man stared at the shed door, voice cracking. A calf. Maria's breath froze. Luke's eyes widened. Bronco whimpered. A calf. Luke repeated softly. The old man nodded. A young one. Left alone. Waiting. He looked at the wild horse. He didn't run away from grief. He ran to protect what little he had left. Luke felt the world quiet around him. Maria whispered, but, if the calf is still in there, then why didn't he bring it with him? The old man's voice softened with heartbreak. Because the calf isn't alive anymore. Maria covered her mouth. Bronco cried softly, sensing the sorrow. The wild horse stood frozen, eyes heavy with a memory too painful for words. Luke stepped forward carefully. Then, what exactly is inside the shed? The old man nodded toward the door. Not the calf, he whispered. What's left of him, and the truth that will test all of you. Luke slowly reached for the door. Maria held Bronco tighter. The wild horse lowered his head, bracing for a past he never wanted to see again. And then, Luke pushed the door open. The shed smelled of old wood, dust, and something faintly sweet, like hay that had been left untouched for too many seasons. Sunlight slipped through the crooked roof in thin strips, landing on the floor in broken lines. Luke paused at the doorway, letting his eyes adjust. Maria stood behind him, her hand resting on Bronco's back. The wild horse hovered close, breathing slow but tense, every muscle pulled tight as a bowstring. Inside the shed, the light finally settled. And Luke saw it. Not danger. Not a person. Not another animal hiding in fear. But a small, carefully built corner of hay, shaped like a nest. A shelter. A memory frozen in time. A place the wild horse had built long ago, piece by piece, for the calf he could not save. A lone bell collar lay in the middle, rusted and quiet. Maria stepped forward, her voice barely a whisper. He came back here, every day? The old man nodded. For months. Maybe longer. The wild horse walked past Luke and lowered his head into the little nest, touching the rusted bell with his nose. His breath trembled. His eyes softened with a grief so deep it made Luke swallow hard. Bronco let out a soft cry, taking careful steps inside as though afraid to disturb anything. He sniffed the bell, then the hay, then pressed his small head against the wild horse's leg. Maria covered her mouth as tears filled her eyes. He was looking for a family he lost. Luke lowered his hat. And now he's found one. The old man stepped inside slowly, his boots scraping the dirt. My boy loved him, he whispered. And that love never left. It just needed somewhere to land again. Maria knelt between Bronco and the wild horse. We can rebuild this place, she said. Make it safe again. Luke nodded. We'll fix the roof. Patch the walls. Bring clean hay. This won't be a grave anymore. It'll be a home. The wild horse lifted his head, eyes shining with something finally unburdened, peace. Bronco nudged him gently as if claiming him as his own. The old man smiled weakly. You've given them both a second chance. Maria turned to Luke. Not just them, she said softly. All of us. Luke felt something warm settle in his chest. Something whole. We'll take care of each other, he said. From now on. They stepped out of the shed together. The afternoon sun washed over them, soft, warm, forgiving. Behind them, the wild horse and Bronco walked side by side, no longer alone in their past or their future. Maria took Luke's hand. "Do you think we can make this work?" Luke squeezed gently. "Yes," he said. "Because we're not running anymore. We're building." Bronco let out a small cheerful sound. The wild horse breathed calmly, standing tall and steady. For the first time they all felt the same thing. Belonging. Moral of the story. Family isn't only the one you're born into. Sometimes it's the ones who find you in your hardest moments, stay beside you in silence, and teach you that healing is possible again. And together, they built a new beginning beyond the creek. Here is your YouTube description, hashtags and video tags. All optimized for emotional Western-style storytelling and high audience retention.